The rain had turned the city into a blur of broken lights and soaked pavement when the boy stepped forward. His shoes were too big, his jacket too thin, and his hands trembled as he pulled a small wheelchair closer to himself. The man he stopped was tall, well-dressed, and clearly out of place in the crowded shelter doorway. The boy looked up at him with eyes far older than his years and said, in a voice that barely rose above the storm, "Sir, my sister can't walk, can we stay with you?" For a moment, time froze. Daniel Carter, CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country, single father, and a man accustomed to boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions, had faced hostile takeovers with less shock than he felt right then. He hadn't planned to come to the shelter. He had driven past it countless times, always meaning to donate, always too busy. Tonight, grief had pulled him off his usual route. Grief and guilt. His daughter, Lily, had died 3 years earlier after a sudden illness, and the anniversary of her death still hollowed him out. He had come to the shelter only to escape the echo of his own house, and now this boy stood before him, holding on to a sister who couldn't walk, asking for something Daniel hadn't offered in years. His heart, the shelter volunteer was already shaking her head. "We're full," she said gently, exhaustion written into her bones. "We'll try again tomorrow." The boy tightened his grip on the wheelchair. The girl in it couldn't have been more than 7. Her legs lay still beneath a thin blanket, her face pale but calm. She looked up at Daniel and smiled, a small, brave smile that struck him like a blow. Daniel heard himself speak before he had time to think. "What's your name?" "I'm Ayan," the boy said quickly. "This is my sister, Zara." "How old are you?" Daniel asked. "I'm 10, Ayan replied. Then, after a pause, "I take care of her." Daniel swallowed. He looked at the rain, at the shelter doors closing, at the city rushing by as if this moment didn't matter. Then he looked back at the children. "Come with me," he said quietly. Ayan's eyes widened. "Really?" Daniel nodded, though fear fluttered in his chest. "Yes. Just for tonight." That "just for tonight" would change all of their lives. Daniel's house was silent when they arrived, too big, too clean, too empty. Ayan wheeled Zara inside slowly, as if afraid the place might reject them. Zara's eyes grew wide as she took in the space, the warmth, the soft light. "Is this a hotel?" she asked softly. Daniel smiled for the first time that night. "No. It's just a house." He set them up in the guest room, ordered food, and found blankets. Ayan watched everything carefully, like a soldier in unfamiliar territory. When the food arrived, he made sure Zara ate first. Only after she was done did he touch his own plate. That night, after the children fell asleep, Daniel sat alone in his living room, staring at a photo of Lily on the mantel. "What would you think of this?" he whispered. The house didn't answer, but for the first time in years, it didn't feel so empty. The next morning, Daniel learned their story. Their mother had died a year earlier after a long illness. Their father had left long before that. Zara had been born healthy, but a spinal injury from an accident had taken away her ability to walk. Medical bills swallowed what little they had. Ayan had quit school to take care of his sister. They moved from shelters to streets, from kindness to cruelty, surviving day by day. Daniel listened, his chest tight. He thought of Lily in her hospital bed, of the machines, of the helplessness. He thought of the promises he had made then, to be better, to live differently, that he had broken. "I don't want charity," Ayan said quietly, eyes fixed on the floor. "I just want her to be safe." Daniel met his gaze. "So do I." What began as one night became a week. A week became a month. Daniel arranged medical appointments for Zara. Doctors spoke in careful tones about rehabilitation, about long-term care. There were no guarantees. Daniel paid the bills without a second thought, but guilt crept in. Why them? Why now? Why hadn't he done this sooner? Ayan started school again. The first day, he stood at the gate, fists clenched, terrified of being left behind. Daniel crouched to his level. "I'll be here," he promised. And he was, every single day. Zara laughed more in those months than she had in years. She learned the layout of the house by heart, memorized Daniel's footsteps, and waited for him every evening. Sometimes she would ask about Lily, and Daniel would tell her stories, his voice steady even when his heart shook. But not everything was easy. Daniel's board grew restless. Headlines began to whisper. CEO harboring homeless children? Distraction at the top? His advisors urged him to place the kids in foster care, to protect the company, his image, his focus point. One night, after a particularly brutal meeting, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, head in his hands. Ion noticed. Are we causing trouble? The boy asked softly. Daniel looked up, startled. Why would you think that? Ion swallowed. People always leave when it gets hard. Daniel stood and pulled him into a hug. Ion stiffened at first, then melted into it. I'm not leaving, Daniel said firmly. And in that moment, he realized he meant it. Still, fear lingered. Zara's condition worsened briefly, and Daniel spent nights in hospital corridors again, memories crashing over him. One night, as Zara slept, Ion sat beside Daniel. You're scared, Ion said. Daniel nodded. I lost my daughter once. Ion was quiet for a long time. Then he said, my sister says you didn't lose her. She says love doesn't disappear. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Months passed. Zara began physical therapy. Progress was slow and painful, but she was stubborn. One day, supported by bars and sheer determination, she stood, only for a second, but it was enough to bring everyone in the room to tears. Did you see? She laughed, breathless. I did it. Daniel clapped, his hands shaking. Ion cried openly, not even trying to hide it. The media storm eventually broke. Not with scandal, but with truth. Daniel spoke publicly for the first time about Lily, about grief, about the night a boy at a shelter asked him for help. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured into shelters. Volunteers signed up in droves. Daniel's company launched initiatives focused on housing and accessibility, but the greatest change wasn't in the world, it was in their home. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Zara wheeled herself into the living room where Daniel and Ion Saturday. I have something to ask, she said seriously. Daniel smiled. That sounds dangerous. She grinned. Can we be a family? Like, officially? The room went still. Daniel felt his throat close. He knelt in front of her. I was hoping you'd ask. The adoption process wasn't simple. Paperwork, interviews, delays. Old fears resurfaced. But this time, Daniel didn't face them alone. Ion stood taller every day, pride and relief shining in his eyes. Zara faced each challenge with quiet courage. The day the adoption was finalized, Ion held Daniel's hand so tightly it hurt. Zara wore a yellow dress and smiled the same brave smile she had worn at the shelter outside the courthouse. A reporter asked Daniel, why did you do it? Daniel looked at his children, because that's what they were now. Because one night, a boy asked me for kindness, he said. And in answering him, I found my way back to life. Years later, Daniel would still remember the rain, the shelter, the trembling voice that changed everything. He would tell the story often, not as a tale of rescue, but of connection. Of how broken people can heal each other. Of how family isn't born only from blood, but from courage, love, and a single question asked at the right moment. Sir, my sister can't walk, can we stay with you? Sometimes, the smallest voices carry the power to rebuild a heart. And sometimes, saying yes doesn't just save someone else, it saves you too.